The main character waits in the cold for help, but no one comes for her. Basil told Julia to wait for him in the abandoned carriage. He asked her to wear the best silk cloak in the country. Basil promised her that he would come and told Julia that he loved her. This girl was dearer to him than anyone in the world. Now a support group has set out to search. They were promised to wait a few more days and then leave. Lord Carys ordered silence because they were almost there. But he told his assistants about this at the very beginning. Soon the commander was told that there was someone else here and he was alive. The support group was surprised because it is difficult to survive in such cold. Lord Carys opened the abandoned carriage and saw a girl inside. It will take half a day to reach the nearest settlement. There are bandits nearby, 3 of them, but they are quite skilled. Carys ordered to capture only one and kill the rest. When the robbers were found, they began to run away. One of them was caught, and he asked what they were. The man introduces himself as Carys Lancea, His Majesty's second knight. Carys guesses that this girl was their target. She is an orphan, and for unknown reasons she seduced the young gentleman, promising to marry him. They planned to run away together, so the bandits were ordered to deal with her. Carys did not want to listen to anything anymore. He ordered the robber to be killed. The assistant said that they would dispose of the body by throwing it off the cliff. Then Lancey announced that it was time for them to take a break as well. They need to get down as quickly as possible, and those who lag behind will go on their own. Once warm and comfortable, the girl was put to bed. The doctor said that this girl could die this way. Her heart was beating too slowly. They hurried here through the snowstorm, but they can't delay because of this girl. The assistant thought that they would at least get some rest, but it was not to be. There were no spare clothes or a sleeping bag in her luggage. The ring on her finger looks expensive, so the young gentleman may have something to do with it. He assumed that she had been waiting for her lover in the cold all night. When the assistant noticed that she had woken up, he hurried to call the doctor. Carys tells her that he found her freezing at a mountain fork. His people dealt with it, but there is no guarantee that they will return. The assassins were hired by the Marquis Majorama's provincial governor, and that was all Carys knew. It looked like Julia was heading to Ortega, just like the commander. He told her that she had until tomorrow morning to recover if she wanted to be under his protection. At that moment, the girl unexpectedly called the man by name. Julia asked the man if he believed in curses. Carys replied that he didn't believe such a thing and asked why she was asking. Then the main character confesses that she was cursed to immortality. 9 times she thought she had died, but then came back to life. Carys thought that she was just a crazy girl. But Julia told him that if things went on like this, his people would die. Julia Arte is cursed. She realized that her second life ended in vain. After being rescued by Carys, Julia returned to Marquis Minoram. She asked her lover why he left her if he loved her. He made the main character wait for him in the cold all night. Basil's excuse was obvious, but she wanted to believe his words. And when Julia opened her eyes, she saw that Carys Lancea had saved her from death in the blizzard. Each time Julia changed her way of life, but the longer she lived, the more she hated Majorama. The main character shares that she has lived like this 8 times already. Carys found the story interesting, and Julia realized that he didn't believe her. He asked why she told him about it, and Julia replied that he continued to save her. Carys himself wanted this, and moreover, his people found her. That's why Julia shares this with him to save his people. There will be 2 more attacks before they leave the mountains. But you can avoid this by turning onto the path in the valley where herbalists walk. Carys wonders if Julia tried to save his people in past lives. He told her that they were leaving at midnight, and she would go with them. Carys warned that if she lied, she would face a 10th life. Later, the commander states that they will turn onto a side path, and the herbalists will show them the way. They are actually planning to leave in the middle of the night. Julia gives them her ring, asking them to accept it in exchange for all their troubles. She asked to lead them along a secret mountain path that no one can see. If anyone asks about them, let them answer that they know nothing. Babaslav asked her if she knew how to ride a horse. He checked her temperature, noting that her face was hot. Julia didn't want to cause any problems, so she said everything was fine. But Babaslav warned her that a snowstorm was approaching ahead. The girl asked not to worry because the snowstorm would soon pass. Still, he gives the main character his gloves so that she can stay warmer. She remembers that in her past life, Karis's people always died. In the end, Julia thanked Boboslav for the gloves. There were hundreds of mercenaries on that path. They were lucky enough to take a different route. Suspicious people are said to also be checking the entrance to the village. Karu remembers Julia telling him where the attacks would take place. They didn't know what to do because it was dangerous to go around in such a snowstorm. But Boboslav recalls how Julia warned that the snowstorm would end. They all looked up and saw that the sky had indeed cleared. Karis gives Julia another chance to tell the truth. She replies that she is not a spy, and Karis asks how she will prove it. The heroine decided to tell what kind of weather awaits them in the near future. Then she was asked to say who ordered these people to attack her. But Julia thinks that Karis already knows the answer himself. This person turned out to be Empress Denabora. After this, Karis ordered Julia to go with him. A week later, just as Julia said, it started to rain. At the checkpoint of the capital of the Kingdom of Orgeta, the team reports that they have arrived through the mountains. They were able to cross the mountains in such weather, so they were allowed inside. As the main character said, they were allowed in because they crossed the ridge. It also rained all night, as the girl had predicted. Barbafoss had nothing more to say, he believed her. Julia gives him milk with honey and alcohol, thanking him for his hard work. The man smiled and also asked her to take care of her body. Karis Lansea is a bloodless admiral, the second knight of the Great Baikan Empire. He came here by order of the Emperor to explore the southern fleet. Since the fleet was fighting pirates and others, the Emperor could not sit idly by. However, along the way, Karis lost all his people, and in search of revenge, he had to return to Baikan. Julia forced him to trust her, and only then would she receive his power. She told Karis that the Imperial fleet was already on the same side as the pirates. The pirates received funds that the Southern Fleet received in exchange for turning a blind eye to the pirates' activities. And Marquis Mayram is engaged in money laundering. He is the embodiment of Ortega, with the royal palace, with the families and their interests. So Julia tells Karis that he will have to cut off the head of Marquis Majoram. The man asked the girl in a serious tone not to smile like that. He knows those like her, choosing life on the edge of a knife. People only feel tension when they see smiles like that. Karis asked if Julia was so obsessed with her reincarnations because of her lover. But the heroine replied that Basil Majoram meant nothing to her anymore. She just wants to make sure that there is nothing left on the land where Majoram lives. And then she asked if that wasn't how revenge worked. Karis ordered Boboslav to take everyone else to the hotel. Time passed. People rebelled for independence from Baikan. Maxwell greets Karus, who has come to his store, but he came only because he wanted to find out something. It's been 10 years since Maxwell became a resident of Ortega, but Karis realized that Maxwell seemed to know nothing. But then Maxwell asked if Julia was a famous commoner. There were rumors that the orphan tried to seduce the young master. The Marquis hired assassins, but she disappeared with them. But Karis needed information he was not aware of. Julia entered the academy at the age of 16, ranking second in her studies. The Marquis learned that she was having an affair with the heir and stopped supporting the orphanage. The other nobles also turned a blind eye to the orphanage, but the director could not stand it and sold the children on a ship. After this, they tried to marry Julia off to a worker, which is probably why she ran away. If Maxwell hadn't been so helpless, he would have definitely escaped. Karis told him that even a swindler gets information faster. In the evening, Karis invited Julia to dinner. They owed her their lives, but Julia asked them not to worry. Julia didn't want to go with them because Majoram keeps sending assassins and it could interfere with their mission. Karis asks Julia what he can do for her. Julia asked Karis to help her return from the upcoming exam unharmed. The Order of Broy is awarded to those who take first place in the examination. Julia wants Karis to become her patron if she receives the order and works around the palace. Karis reasons that safety is guaranteed in the royal palace. But he doesn't understand why Julia wants to become a servant. There must be an easier way. Julia said that this way she would stab Majorama in the back with the hands of the royal family. Boboslav supports Julia as best he can before the exam. He looks like he's more worried than Julia herself. At the end of the year, Lady Christiane Mayorami should take first place. The director said that Julia had no chance of winning because she was a commoner. It was not for free because the Marquis is a man of great wealth. If Julia would just shut up, everything would be fine, as she was told. After that, she held the title of the best student of the Academy for 4 years in a row. Julia asked Boboslav to wait for her at the office and not go anywhere. The main character thanked him and promised to return soon. So the girl came to the exam, where soon half of the time had already passed. Even before the exam began, Julia went outside. She heard someone calling her name and turned around to see Christine. She wondered what Christine would tell her now. She asked if Julia had come here to write the exam. Christine is more surprised that Julia will write it in her own name. The girl suddenly laughed loudly, clutching her stomach with her hands. Julia told Christine that she was the #1 student, as everyone thought. She asked Christine if she would use her name again. There was a time when Julia envied Christine, the only daughter of the most noble family in the kingdom. Soon, a carriage arrived for Julia, and she quickly climbed inside. Rumors are circulating on the streets that Basil Majoram will soon marry the king's daughter. The number of hyenas searching for Julia has increased to find out if the news of her survival is true. Karis doesn't know why they keep looking for her, but these people look like some of Marjoram's mercenaries. The best student will be announced tomorrow at the graduation ceremony. After this, the main character will enter the palace. Karis asked whose servant Julia planned to become if she won the medal. She said that she would become the servant of the one who hated the Majorams the most. The girl talks about the second prince, Levis Ortega. Levis is a member of the royal family. When he encounters Basil, he tends to be sarcastic. If he looks at the Marquis and his wife, he says that the world will soon be destroyed by such microbes. This is all because the prince's biological mother is the king's mistress. For the Marquis, the son of his mistress is nothing more than just an annoying insect. Karis wonders how influential the prince is and whether that will be enough to protect him. But Julia replied that they themselves had to raise their influence. This year, Prince Louis is attending the ceremony and wants to give a speech. The girls were discussing how Prince Levis was truly handsome. And then they announced that the best student was Julia Arte. Of course, people were shocked that it wasn't Christine. Levis praised Julia, saying he admired her efforts. It was at that moment that she said that she wanted to become his servant. Basil pushed his way through the crowd, trying to shout to Julia. Levis remembers that this commoner was in a relationship with Basil. Julia promised Levis that he would see Basil's defeat with his own eyes. She promised to throw Basil out, insult and ridicule him. From that moment on, Levis announced that Julia would be his servant. Louis is amazed that Julia rose from the bottom after the breakup. Julia Arte may be the most famous commoner in Ortega. As Julia was leaving, Basil found her and stopped her. She didn't want to listen to him and asked him to let her go. Basil says he tried to reach her that day, but couldn't. A lot of people gathered around them. Everyone wanted to eavesdrop on the conversation. If Julia had left things as they were, she would have frozen to death. Basil told her that he loved her, promising to run away together, but in the end he sent assassins. Basil couldn't believe his ears because he would never do such a thing. Christine approached them and asked what they had done there. She was angry and asked Julia to stop too. Julia shows her the brooch that Christine wanted to get. Julia thought that Christine would cry in the mansion because her pride was hurt. Basil tries to talk to Julia, promising to return everything to her. The girl asked him to try dying if he wanted her to come back. She wanted him to feel what she felt in the mountains, and then he will find out whether Julia, this pathetic commoner, will forgive him. The main character left, leaving a tearful Basil alone. Later, Prince Louis gave Julia new clothes. Barboslav was delighted and asked her to try it on quickly. Karis decided not to go with them, since today's show had probably reached the Marquis. It seems that Basil has only just begun to throw around words about love. Karis regrets that he didn't immediately catch these hyenas and give them into Julia's hands. The girl clarified that her revenge would not end there. She noticed that Karis was still worried. No one ever saw him bleed to death on the battlefield. In this case, Karu is Julia's best weapon. But there is one more person she needs to find in the palace. Christine was furious that she was forced to take the exam. She was sure that she could not be weaker than the commoner Julia. Father asks Christine to calm down, but it was too late. She says her brother was treated like a shameless nobleman. Because of this, Christine was ashamed and did not want to show herself in public anymore. Christine isn't sure such things are easily forgotten. Christine's mother appeared and asked her to stop crying and making a scene. She heard that Julia had become the second prince's maid. For her, such a couple seemed ideal, a bastard prince and a commoner servant. Babaslav tells Julia how much he will miss her. Karis asked when the carriage would arrive for her. But before the girl could answer, an order came from the second prince. Julia must prepare to enter the palace as a servant. Julia decided to go down alone, while Karis and Babaslav would stay here. Karis asked her to find Maxwell if she needed anything, and she could contact him through him. Karis promised the heroine that he would help her at any time. Finally, Julia got into the carriage and went to the palace. One of the servants accompanies her around the palace, since Levis is not here today. He mentions that they didn't have a head maid, but now there will be two. The second woman is a servant who clearly defines what she likes and what she does not. Since Julia is a commoner, the maids don't know what to do. She hears them whispering, wondering what to do. Julia ends up greeting them, which almost makes them scream. A voice is heard in the distance, indicating how to greet someone correctly. That girl turned out to be Cordelia Hinch. Cordelia asked the maids if they really thought Julia would be offended by a casual greeting. She meets Julia and tells her that she can call her Coco. Cordelia clarified that the girl's room is on the second floor. Soon the Count came to them from the inner palace. He told Julia that she needed to check her background first. Julia replied, confused, that the second prince had personally called her. The Count, in a rage, began shouting that the test was important. Cordelia tensed up when she heard that Julia needed to have a medical checkup. They must make sure that Julia does not have any blasphemous marks. Cordelia didn't like the way the palace representatives acted. She is the only daughter of Count Hinch and Lewis's personal servant. She was also nicknamed the Devil's Servant Coco because of her fiery nature. Cordelia asked why they didn't examine her too then. She says that she too may have a bad mark on her body and may be a robber. Julia tries to calm her down, telling her that she is okay. The first virtue a servant should have is fidelity, and the second is dignity. A maid shares her life with the royal family and is responsible for herself. She explains to Julia that she is a close confidant of the second prince, and she must defend her honor. Cordelia would not bear to see His Highness's maid lose her honor before her eyes. The managing maid told her not to be so angry. She clarified that she would be the one conducting the medical examination. Cordelia answered her that it did not concern her. But Julia still asked her to stop, assuring her that everything was fine. Cordelia asked that the medical examination be carried out in her presence so that she could control everything. In the end, they agreed to this condition. Julia has a long neck and good posture, according to the manager. Cordelia reminds that Julia is a servant, not His Highness's mistress. There were no problems with the background check and medical examination. Cordelia tells Julia that she better go home, but Julia has nowhere to go because she has no home and no family. She again tries to convey to the girl that everything is fine. Cordelia doesn't understand why Julia is trying so hard to stay in the palace. But she froze when Julia suddenly replied that she didn't want to die. She said that people hired by the Marquis were hunting for her life. Cordelia felt sorry for Julie, who chose such a man, but she was convinced that she was definitely not bad. Cordelia asked the maids to show Julia to her room. One of the maids asked Julia not to be offended, speaking on her own behalf. Julia recalls that when they had problems with their conversion, Cordelia intervened. She asked the maid not to worry because she liked Cordelia. Cordelia asked me to find her if Julia was reborn again, and Julia realizes that this is what happened. They met again. Karis had heard of legends, magic, and myths from the Baikan Empire. However, he remembers that Julia knows his name from somewhere. He remembers how she predicted the weather, attacks, and everything else. Then he remembered her words that the Baikan fleet was distributing pirate money. Maxwell suddenly bursts into his office, declaring that this is all true. Karis realizes that Julia's words have been confirmed once again. In this situation, they must make her an ally, regardless of her methods of obtaining information. They say that the money is being laundered by Ortega's nobles, and that many people are involved. The fleet of the Baikan Empire was simply carrying out orders from pirate traitors. There is no evidence yet because it is being carefully concealed. Karis decided that they would then attack the Southern Fleet themselves. He will go to sea with his people, and he asked Maxwell to help Julia. He asked him not to ask about details and to support her in everything she wanted. Julia has a lot of experience. She needs to make sure that they do everything for her. Cordelia did indeed ask to come to her again if Julia was reborn. The Berry Medal was originally Julia's, so she can use her skills to pass the test. But Julia already had a goal. She had no time for these games of maids. From the day Julia becomes his closest servant, the Marquis's dreams will be in tatters. Julia can't involve Cordelia in her revenge. But she is not the only one who considers Majorama an enemy in this country. Therefore, Cordelia asked him to come to her palace, promising to help. But when Julia comes back to life, Coco won't remember her. But Cordelia will tell her a simple way to win her favor. She whispered something in her ear and asked her to do this, but it seems that Cordelia has forgotten about their past relationship. It so happened that Julia overslept on the very first day. Later, she came to the kitchen to the maids and cooks. They told her that Coco and Louis usually had breakfast after noon. Cordelia's habit of waking up late remained the same. Then the main character decided that she would eat first. Suddenly she was informed that His Highness the Prince was looking for her and that Basil was also here now. The main character went out into the yard and met them. Levis said he invited Basil to have breakfast with them. Basil sees the prince take Julia's hand and he doesn't like it. He told Levis that he needed to discuss something with his lover. But Levis remembers that Julia is already his ex. He said he was very keen to see Basil humiliated at the ceremony. So now, if Basil wants to talk, it will only be in his presence. First of all, Julia had no idea what kind of business Majoram could have with her. Basil insisted that they discuss everything in a more private setting. But Julia refused, replying that he should observe all the rules of conduct. Basil can't believe she brushed him off. Levis even felt better after all this. Julia apologized to him that his morning was interrupted because of her. Levis thought that the three of them would have a fun breakfast. He plans to host a welcome dinner with Julia as his maid. Basil is not reassured, asking what Julia was thinking. But the reason is that the Majorama family hates Prince Levis. Basil tries to explain that it was not he who hired the killers, but his father. The main character always considered Basil romantic and good-natured. Even a simple gold coin given by him was a light for Julia. The girl really considered Basil a deity. Basil promised her that he would leave his family and go with her. But in the end, he left Julia and chose his family. It turns out that this is love that died out behind one closed door. Basil doesn't like that Julia doesn't understand his feelings. Seeing Basil's suffering, Julia feels only emptiness. She asked him to break off his engagement to the princess for her sake. But she is still sure that he won't succeed. When Julia returned, she saw Cordelia and Levis together. Levis said they watched as Basil walked and whimpered in grief. The prince could not miss such a hilarious scene. Louis suggested that Louise buy her some dresses. He insisted on this because he had to repay her. After thinking for a bit, Julia still had one request. The heroine would like to attend the royal tournament. At this event, children of royalty and nobles demonstrate their abilities. In addition to demonstrating skills, there is an opportunity to assess leadership qualities. This way you can understand which family supports this or that prince. Cordelia is not happy with this arrangement because Julia doesn't seem to understand where she wants to go. Through competition, future leaders can achieve great things. But those future leaders learn to fight in advance. But if Julia shows up at the tournament, Basil will go crazy and won't be able to do anything. Levis warned that he would not be able to protect her because it was not fitting for him to drag a maid around with him. And Christian Majoram will also be participating there. Julia replied that she already knew about it too. Then the girl suggests that they go to their first fight together. The prince tries to calm down a worried Coco. Levis asks Julia not to disappoint him when she played in the tournament. After breakfast, they decided to go look at dresses. But suddenly she was informed that things had already arrived for her. The owner of the wardrobe said that Julia's patron sent it. The main character immediately guessed that it was Lord Carus. There are not only dresses here, but also gloves, handbags, and jewelry. For Cordelia, it all seemed too suspicious. When they were ready, Levis asked Julia to stay strong. He asked to leave Cordelia and not to worry that she was not going. The theme of the tournament is an essay they must write for the Emperor of Baikan. This year marks 20 years since the Kingdom of Ortega has been under the protection of the Baikans. It is now that they want to confirm the loyalty of their vassal states. Baikan will demand a New Year's address from Ortega expressing loyalty. But His Majesty will not want to write this essay himself. His Highness does not have to win the first duel. No matter how wonderful the appeal, they will still choose Prince Marjoram. They need to light a fire in the hearts of those who are waiting for Ortega's independence. But Ortega is not a colony of the Baikan Empire. But the second prince thought it was the same as a colony. You can celebrate victory and maintain peace, but never humiliate yourself. The Emperor will not be upset by his bold message and will not set fire to Ortega. So Levis decided that Julia would write the message. Levis heard that Christine was competing for first place in the academy again. Julia said that Christine never beat her. This place really does remind Julia of a battlefield. It is obvious that the nobles were divided into factions. The first group is around Majoram, the second group is around the second princess, and the third is around the third prince. Being the son of a concubine, the second prince is not considered heir to the throne. However, the situation will change soon. Christine noticed Julia and asked what she was doing there. She replied that she had come here as a servant to the second prince. But no one understands since when commoners are allowed to appear at the tournament. Julia knows that they are close nobles of the Marquis, like cattle that cannot survive without the scraps left by the Marquis. Christine asked her to leave this place for her own good, but Julia replied that she was the second prince's servant, not Lady Marjoram's. But she was asked if she really thought her position had any status. They tell her that first she seduced Basil, and now she is trying to get to the prince. Coco asked him to take his hand away before she broke his fingers. She asked them if they knew that touching a butler's maid was a disgrace to the king's honor. She threatened to sew their lips shut, tear them off, or cut them. But Christine said this out of concern for Julia. Coco asked why she was apologizing to her and not Julia. Eventually, Coco takes Julia with her to find the prince. The girl ordered Julia not to get involved with these people. When Coco saw the weak, she simply couldn't pass by. In Julia's eyes, Coco was a true saint who protected the weak. When they met the prince, he asked if they had finished their squabble. Levis has already said that he does not intend to defend Julia. Coco was furious, but the prince didn't want to quarrel. It looks like the theme of the first fight will be announced soon. It was announced that this year marks the 20-year anniversary of the union between the kingdom and the empire. That's why they asked to write a New Year's address to the Emperor of Baikan. The person who writes the best appeal will be the winner. There was little time, so many did not have time to properly complete their appeals. The contents of all of them basically boiled down to a typical promise of fidelity. However, one New Year's address was different. Addressed by the second prince, Levis Ortega. This address is both formal and witty. It was surprising that the second prince, who had kept everything to himself, finally spoke out. Levis was asked when he would invite them for tea, but he did not consider it necessary. Levis's New Year's message was imprinted on their eyes. They will deliver the New Year's message from the first prince. Everyone began to discuss the appeal, which was written superbly. Christine was afraid that she might be kicked out because she didn't win. She remembers tirelessly rewriting the appeals every 4 years. Julia tells Christine that she lost this time too. She asked Christine if she wanted to change her name this time too. That evening, Levis asked Julia if she had seen the expression on Christine's face. It was a pleasure to teach the people of Majorama a lesson, and the address was excellent. The prince wanted to assign a personal maid to Julia, but she refused. Instead, she wanted jewelry, and he hadn't thought she was interested in that kind of thing. Julia would like a headband decorated with snow-white pearls. Closer to night, the heroine came to Coco to give her a gift. Coco helped her only to avoid ruining her reputation. She wanted to say that she didn't need gifts, but Julia had already disappeared. She decided to throw away the gift since Coco said that she didn't need it. Yet Coco accepted the gift because she didn't want to burn it. Julia asked her to open the box, otherwise she would really throw it away. And when Coco did this, she saw a headband lying inside. Julia knew she would like it because she had told her so herself. Coco asked her to tell the prince about this headband as a reward. She will feel sorry that such a poor girl like Julia gives her such an expensive thing, and she will try to compensate for the damage tenfold. From their first meeting, Coco already felt sorry for Julia and wanted to help somehow. She told the girl that she might sound presumptuous now, but if they become friends in Julia's next life, then life will be a success for Coco. At the time, Julia couldn't answer, but she felt the same way. Even if she is just Coco's friend, she will not regret it. Coco asked her how she knew, and Julia replied that she just thought she did. She put Coco's headband on her head and said it suited her very well. Next, we are transferred to the first Baikon's Southern Fleet. Rumors reached Karis that the fleet had become pirates' errand boys. From now on, they will be divided into useful and useless. The useful ones will be saved, and the others will become fish food. They are going to attack the ship of the commander of the Southern Fleet. Karis said that by throwing the boys into the water one by one, they would learn something. Barbaslov wishes Julia were here. He misses her. If she were here, she could tell them a lot. Barbaslov still wants them to stop by after the mission. One of Karis's crew reported that they had brought the captain. Karis ordered that he be thrown into the sea, and so they did. The rest of the bound ones began to ask for forgiveness and say how they were useful. Any connection between the fleet and pirates is a crime. First, we need to identify those who have the information. Later, the commander was informed that gold had been found in the captain's office. When Karis examined it, he realized that these were pirate coins. The Navy will probably insist that it confiscated it from the pirates. It is missing as evidence that the fleet commander is in cahoots with the pirates. Karis asked if there was another way to obtain evidence. Basil lies in his room and thinks about Julia. They offered him something to eat, but Basil said he wanted to be alone. But the servant was told to make sure that he ate. When the butler was inside, Basil wanted to ask something. He wants to know if it's true that his father sent hyenas to kill Julia. The butler explains that he ordered to get rid of the woman who was disturbing Basil's heart. But since the hyenas failed, the man wonders why Basil is asking this. But Basil just wants to know the truth and asks to answer honestly. The father ordered that Julia's face be disfigured and her head returned. Basil can't believe that his father would do this to the one he loves. The butler asked to forget about her because she was causing problems. But Basil tells him to shut up, giving him a hot slap in the face. In the end, the servant only said that he hoped that Basil would become the Marcus's successor. He again asked her to forget about Julia, saying that the time for playing with dolls was over. But Basil loves Julia, and they both did not accept his feelings. He asked to tell his father that he would not marry Princess Shatrin. In the opinion of the second prince, Majorum Basil is very stupid. He doesn't understand how someone like Julia could be allowed to slip away. Coco said that Levis just wants to take out his frustrations on Basil. Levis thought that by saying this, he would appear in Julia's eyes to be something other than what he really was. He suddenly saw a familiar headband on Coco's head. She immediately explained to him that Julia had given it to her as a token of gratitude. They started arguing, but the main character thought they were getting along well. Levis reports that Basil has requested an official visit. He recalls how Julia herself said that etiquette must be observed. The girl said that His Highness also had a guest at noon today. The nobleman they saw at the tournament will arrive. It would be a casual tea party, and he asked everyone to dress casually. Julia said that they would wait nearby. The main character added that Basil will have to wait a little. She ended up being a little late because she was at a meeting. Basil tells her that he told his father that he would not marry the princess. He asked Julia to wait a little longer, and he would take her away from here. Basil clarifies that he instructed the butler to convey his message. By calling off the marriage, he will be pressured and threatened. But Basil doesn't understand why she keeps talking like that. He noticed that the ring he had given her was no longer on her. The girl calmly replied that she had thrown it away. She waved him off and said he would have better things to do if he married a princess. She also asked him to check whether the butler had indeed conveyed his message. The previous Basil never contradicted the Marquis's orders. She doesn't know what influenced Basil to become like this. She was informed that her things had arrived, although she was not expecting anything. It turned out to be the dress she ordered. She will need to pop into the store briefly to confirm. Julia recognized this man as Maxwell. He asked her to get into the carriage, saying that her patron was already waiting for her. Julia didn't expect Caris to be here in person. She noted that they confirmed the collusion between the fleet and the pirates. Caris gives this money to Julia since their plans will need it. He asks how one can find evidence of the fleet's betrayal. The girl immediately realized that he was talking about the ledger. The fleet doesn't leave behind risky evidence like treaties, but the Marquis hid this book in a secret place. It's not easy to find, so we'll have to settle for another option. Julia says the money is most likely hidden in her mistress's house. The mistress runs an inn in the harbour, a house with a blue roof. This evidence will be sufficient, and Caris will be convinced of it himself. He ordered Maxwell to take Julia to the castle and follow his mistress. And Caris himself and the others will capture the commander. Julia said goodbye to Caris, and they left. Finally, the girl said that the Emperor had one more goal. Coco couldn't choose what to wear, even though she had a lot of clothes. You need to choose carefully, because the New Year's banquet is coming. Julia offered her one dress, but Coco didn't like it. Then she suggested another one, but Coco thinks that this dress is not wearable. Suddenly, Levis appeared and offered to keep the dress for himself. He looks at the reflection, saying that it suits him perfectly. Beautiful things suit him better, and he asked Coco to give them to him. But the girl angrily said that this dress was for Julia. Julia said she couldn't wear it to the banquet. In fact, Coco bought this dress because she was thinking about Julia. She told her that if she didn't want to wear it, she should throw it away. In the end, Julia thanked her and accepted the dress. Levis said that first she stole the headband, and now she is giving away the dress. Julia reveals that Basil has said he will break off his engagement to Shatrin. The prince only hopes that Basil will not give up so easily. Lately, thanks to him, life has become more exciting. And so the day of the New Year's banquet arrives. The guests who arrived talked with Christine Majoram. Basil remembers how crowds of guests used to gather around him too. Before this, he asked the butler if he had conveyed his message. He asked him to pull himself together because this marriage would be beneficial. He asked Basil to calm down because otherwise there would be problems. He asked what would happen if the young lady became the heir. The butler is sure that Basil has not forgotten that Christine is laying claim to the place of heir. Basil happened to notice the second prince, so he thought that Julia was there too. But before he could take a step, some girl approached him. It turned out to be Shatrin Ortega, who had already looked for him everywhere. But Basil had no time for her. He wanted to know where Julia was. The guests began to whisper about how disrespectful Basil was. Shatrin tries to calm down, citing the fact that Basil is nervous. She extends her hand to him and invites him to dance. The guests were horrified that she made the first move when it should have been the other way around. But, unexpectedly for everyone, Basil asked Shatrin to look for someone else. Shatrin froze in place, unable to believe what she heard. Basil does not want to marry her and asks her to break off the engagement with him. Later, a stunned Coco and Louis burst into Julia's room. Levis tells how Basil, in front of everyone, refused the engagement. Shatrin extended her hand to him, and Coco told him how he had refused her. They were shocked that Basil dared to insult Shatrin's pride. Levis wondered if Basil was really that in love with Julia. He couldn't accept Julia's rejection and now became literally obsessed with her. Coco warned the girl and asked her to be careful in the future. The royal family and the Majorams must never harm each other. For her own safety, Coco asked Julia to stay in the palace. The main character thanked her and said that she would do as Coco asked. But there is no guarantee that the palace will be safe. Time passes and the maid thinks that Julia should go outside. She said that Shatrin suddenly asked to be brought. But Shatrin was already here and it was too late to say anything. Julia greeted her and Shatrin asked her to raise her head. And when the girl did this, Shatrin sharply slapped her in the face. She asked if Julia thought the royal family was a laughingstock. Shatrin asks her to kneel down and apologize. Julia apologized, saying that she found it difficult to do something like that. She can't get on her knees and beg for forgiveness when she has done nothing wrong. Of course, this answer infuriated Shatrin even more. But Julia told her that Basil was not worthy of the princess's attention. She talks about what a terrible person he is, about his actions. He needs marriage with the princess only for the sake of the family's honor. She was asked how she dared to talk about such things. Julia was angry, but as a commoner she could do nothing. She asked Shatrin not to show mercy to such a bad person. Coco was angry that Julia seemed to have lost her fear. She asked her if there was anything she wasn't afraid of. Coco thought she had caused a conflict between the Marjorams and the royal family. But after listening to Coco, Julia had an idea. She came up with an idea of how best to deal with the two-headed snakes. Shatrin angrily declares that she did not want to get married from the very beginning. King Ortega and the king's concubine, Levisa's mother, ask her to calm down. Shatrin asked to see how Basil trampled her honor. She asks him to force the Marquis and his son to kneel before her. But the man asks if she knows that such a thing cannot be done. Shatrin doesn't believe that their marriage will improve the situation. The girl doesn't want them to allow her honor to be tarnished. The king's concubine asks him to rest a little first. Levis says that Shatrin went to see her father. Since Basil is a claimant to the throne, it is impossible for him to kneel before Shatrin. In fact, the second prince hates Shatrin very much. However, he did not expect at all that Julia would get hurt. He feels very sorry because he thought she would be safe. Levis is not powerful enough to take revenge on Shatrin. But Julia told him that everything was fine and she would cope with it. She had made up her mind about this from the day she decided to enter this palace. Levis thought that Julia had already caused at least 3 violent events while she was here. He asked how long she intended to stay there, and the girl replied that she would stay until they kicked her out. And when he said he wouldn't kick her out, she smiled, saying she would always be here. Now that Shatrin is dealing with Basil, it's even more interesting to watch. By evening, Levis was very drunk, and Coco and Julia helped him to bed. After this, Coco told Julia that she hated the Marjorams unbearably. The queen, Majorama's man, fenced in his majesty. The king was concerned about her because he did not look after Louis. Levis's mother could not be around, and the young prince grew up alone. Therefore, Levis felt that he had no place in the palace. His Highness left the palace because his mother is in charge here. His Majesty loves her very much, but also hates her father very much. Coco is afraid that Julia might make a mistake somewhere, but she replied that we needed to add fuel to the fire. Coco wondered what would happen if Basil found out that Shatrin had hit Julia. Julia thought that he would not want to apologize to her and would judge her. Coco decides to trust Julia and add fuel to the fire. They need to spread rumors that Shatrin hit Julia. As they planned, rumors quickly spread. Soon these rumors reached the ears of Basil Majorama. Basil doesn't want to apologize to a morally rotten person. The father insists that he insulted the royal honor. But Basil asked what then about his own honor. If he wants to remain the successor, his father asks him to apologize. He asks the servants to put Basil in a carriage and drop him off in front of the princess's palace. They grabbed Basil, but he screamed, asking them to let him go. But, obviously, his request was of no use to his father. Later, Basil came to meet Shatrin. He was already disgusting to her, but she had to endure it. Suddenly, Basil asks her if it is true that she hit Julia. Basil didn't know that she would take violence against someone who had done nothing wrong. Shatrin asked how he dared come to her palace to side with his mistress. She doesn't believe that Basil is thus accusing her of jealousy. Basil tries to explain to her that everything is far from true. Shatrin thinks that Basil looks down on the royal family and her. But Basil has already apologized, admitting that it was his mistake. Shatrin is no longer going to accept his apology. She wants him and his family to disappear from her sight forever. After this, the father scolds Basil, saying that it is all his fault. In his opinion, Basil deserves more punishment than Shatrin. Basil decides to ask if Christine is Majoram's successor. He understands that the father always wanted to get rid of his useless son. The man is angry that even in this situation, Basil is behaving like a child. Grabbing him by the scruff of the neck, he says that he has spoiled Basil too much. He orders the butler to lock Basil in the dungeon. Basil is freaking out, asking to be kicked out and cut out of the inheritance. But his father said that if he took Majoram out of his name, he would become a useless resource. He asked what Basil would do if he killed Julia and threw her corpse in front of him. Basil replied that he would not dare touch her, as she was in the prince's palace. But the only one the father cannot kill in the palace is the king. Things turned out much better than Julia thought. Shatrin is forbidden to go out in public. Basil is locked in a dungeon. Julia didn't know it would be so effective. Basil will soon come to an end due to the fear of losing his position. Basil will have a hard time coming to terms with this in the cold basement. Coco came to see Julia, and she just wanted to talk to her. Soon the hyenas hired by Marquis Majoram will come to the palace to kill Julia. But in Coco's opinion, no matter how strong they were, they would not be able to penetrate the palace. But in fact, it is possible, since their target is not the royal family. Julia doesn't want to tell Levis about this because she has other plans. The Marquis always plants spies near the enemies. Coco is worried about Julia because she is risking her life. All the workers in the house are from the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Julia said that they could offer them some money. She shows Coco what her patron sent her. Julia can't yet tell her where she got all this from. Coco says she knows the staff here very well. With these coins, Coco will be able to shake up all the workers. It was raining outside, and the maids were discussing when the weather would clear up. Julia asked them to provide the workers with snacks so that they could eat. She also told them that she would go to bed as usual today. It only remains to be seen which of them is Majoram's spy. When Julia went to bed, she waited for the traitor. After a while, she heard footsteps in her room. She endures until the moment when a person comes closer. On the count of 3, she suddenly jumps out of bed and pours something on the killer. He asked what it was, and she said it was butter. If he was going to kill Julia, he had to prepare for his own death. She throws burning candles at him, and the man catches fire. The security guards came running at the noise and found this terrible picture. Julia asked to put out the fire because she needed a confession. The commander asked to bring sand and check if there were other accomplices outside. Julia asked if his master hadn't warned him that she was quite vigilant. The man guarantees that she will definitely die, since his master never misses. The main character smiled, replying that she was well aware of this. Prince Louis runs into the room in panic with Coco. He is furious that the hyena dared to enter the palace. But Julia tells him it's not his fault. The guard's job is to protect, and the hyenas were trying to kill her. Due to the heavy rain, the hyenas were constantly changing, and the hyenas made their way into the palace. Levis does not understand how the administration manages the workers. Coco guessed that someone had helped them from the inside. They knew where Julia's room was and what route to take. Levis asked the maids to confess before he locked them in the dungeon. Julia asks them to remember everyone who behaved suspiciously. In recent days, Coco has been instructing her trusted maids to monitor the situation. There was a man who did not go to bed until late, collecting all the evidence. The maids working together must know the criminal better than anyone else. So they identified one suspicious maid. Levis ordered that she be taken away and interrogated along with the hyena. The maid screams that it wasn't her, but it was too late. A few days later, we are transported to the southern fleet of Commander Baikan. Karus says it's over and gives them credit for fighting to the end. The man asks him how he dares to disrespect the fleet commander. Karus tells him that his mistress's house was full of pirate coins. He asks how the fleet commander dares to collude with pirates. The commander says his mistress betrayed him. Karus ordered that he be taken away to the Empire and the rest executed. The task assigned by Karus was completed with lightning speed. There is no point in denying that everything was quickly resolved thanks to Julia. They already know that hyenas attacked the palace a few days ago. Luckily, their talisman was fine. Now they return to Ortega to see Julia. The maid Coco is worried because Levis is not eating well. He will ask you to tell her that everything is fine and that she just hasn't had an appetite lately. Levis can't stop thinking that Julia might have died. In the end, the hyena committed suicide without revealing the narrator. Levis asked for increased security due to the invasion of the palace. But they tried to explain to him that knights were needed to protect the royal family and not a simple servant. Lewis concluded that he was not even treated like royalty. In his memories, his mother was always crying. The king loved her, but succumbed to pressure from Majoram and chose another as queen. And Levis's mother will remain unhappy for the rest of her life. Lewis was disgusted by everything connected with the king. But to protect his loved ones, he needs more power. After some time, Julia finally meets Carus. He asked if she was okay after what happened. Maxwell told her that Carus had completed the mission safely. When she asked how Babaslav was, Carus told him to take care of himself. The man extended his hand to her and invited her to go inside. He smiled and said there was no time to doubt. Carus wanted to send Julia more coins, but she said that this was enough for now. The Marquis cooperates with the Southern Fleet. They launder the pirates' money and transfer it to secret funds. Thanks to Carus, this cash flow has been interrupted. Majoram's treasury will gradually sink like a ship with holes. Carus is glad that his mission also helped Julia herself. He tells her that he is leaving Ortega and returning to Baikan. He asked her to say whatever she wanted, and he would try to do it. After completing her revenge, she can go with Carus to the Empire. The main character thought it was a tempting offer. Perhaps she would have been an ordinary person if she had united with Carus in her past life. But the girl tells him that all her desires are in Ortega. Carus asked if she was sure, even though he believed in her success. He asked what she planned to do next once she had destroyed the Majorams. Julia asked him if he believed in her, and he replied that there was no other way. Once he leaves this place, they may never meet again. Carus thought she would express regret because they had become very close. He is sure that she definitely knows something, but does not want to talk. A worried Babaslav runs up to them, finally glad to see Julia. He asked Carus why he didn't tell him that Julia was here. He offered her a drink, but Julia thought it would be strange if the maid got drunk. Babaslav is glad that they have a lot in common and that the commander will take care of them. Laughing, Julia asked why he was being punished like that. Carus doesn't understand why she's laughing, because an unhappy life awaits her. This laughter reminds him of a firefly hiding on a summer night before fading away. Soon the father learns that all communication with the Baikan fleet has been severed. The butler gives him all the information he knows. He also reports that a letter has arrived from the royal palace. The second tournament is about to start, and the man asks what the topic is. The winner will be the one who brings the king the nicest birthday present. The real gift we receive is not His Majesty the King. In Julia's past life, the tournament was organized for Princess Shatrin. Out of concern, the king forced her to take part in the tournament. This time, however, Shatrin is not simply depressed. The gift is supposed to look like it's for the king's birthday, but in reality it will restore Shatrin's honor. Either bribe the king or make an offer to Shatrin. This is necessary to cheer up the princess abandoned by Basil. But Levism cannot accomplish either one or the other. But there is a gift that only Prince Levis can give. What Shatrin wants most now is to trample the Myramovs. Levis, who himself hates them, can support the princess. The choice of successor will be shaken, and His Majesty the King will also think about it. The first prince is the heir, supported by Majoram. But when Shatrin appears, who is supported by the second prince, everything will change. Majoram's position will weaken along with the position of the first prince. But she could become queen and a war would start, but Julia assures that this will not happen. She is confident that Prince Levis will become king. Levis does not have to become king, but at least realize his right to the throne. If she were the Marquis, she would have used the prince for the marriage contract. For example, to propose Levis as a husband for the Empress or Queen. In a past life, Levis was sold as a lover. If a force arises that will support His Highness, Majoram will not be able to treat Levis carelessly. Levis said he has been studying the rudiments of government since he was 12 years old. Julia agreed to help him study, as she herself had studied it at the academy. To survive, you need to seize power, that's the palace. Levis realized long ago that it would be impossible to live peacefully without doing anything. He was afraid to face it, but then Julia appeared. After receiving the medal, she proposed a deal to the royal family. She seduced Basil, being a commoner, and brought a new world. And now Julia asks Levis to become the heir to the throne. The prince decides to trust Julia because he trusts her. On the second day of the tournament, Julia decides to stay in the palace. She believes in Levis and tells him that everything will work out. After they left, Maxwell appears, informing them that the carriage is waiting behind the palace. The larger the territory and the more servants, the more likely it is to find vulnerabilities. They arrived at one place and went down to the basement. Basil heard someone coming and asked who it was. He was genuinely surprised when he saw the main character in front of him. Basil tells Julia how much he missed her. But she considers him an egoist who is not going to think about others. Basil doesn't understand what she's talking about because he's sitting here undeservedly. And then the heroine asked him to put himself in her place from their very first meeting. And then Basil will understand why she changed and became like this. Basil knows that she studied well, but he thinks it is thanks to his family. He believes that she was going to use him to enjoy the life of a noblewoman. But Basil immediately apologized for his words, thinking that he was already going crazy. She tells him that Shatrin has severed ties with his family and he will never become Marquise. Christine will take his place and he will worship her all his life. Now, due to the annulment of the marriage, Basil may be sold to another woman. But he didn't care that he wouldn't become a Marquis, he didn't want to live like a loser. Basil said he didn't do anything, and Julia says he didn't even try. Because all his life Basil never thought about what he had. Suddenly Basil asks Julia to get him out of here. He does not want to live as his father's tool and will find his own way. But he won't live a day if he leaves the mansion. Basil doesn't care what she says, he just wants to get out. Everyone noticed that Levis did not have a gift for the king with him. Levis declares that from today he will support Shatrin. The king respects his decision and likes such a gift. After this, the guests began to congratulate Shatrin. Shatrin didn't expect that Levis would want to support her, but he answered honestly that he didn't like her that much. He asks her to apologize to the maid whom she slapped. Shatrin promised to apologize, agreeing that she had gone a bit too far. She asked her servants to send gifts to the maid at the palace, but Levis said he was asking for an apology, not gifts. Coco understands that there is no point in arguing and it is better to just agree. In any case, Shatrin thanks the prince for choosing her. She knows he's afraid of competition, but she's not like that. Finally, Basil was released from prison. Julia gives him a bag of money and asks him to accept it. It looks like she is showing kindness to some beggar. Maxwell is worried that Basil will come back tomorrow and say that they let him go. She recalls how she learned that Marquis Majoram had sold children from the orphanage. Julia couldn't understand why Basil didn't stop his father, but he then said that it would be better to become a sailor who would do his job. Children who are sold into slavery do not know how badly they are treated. She's just curious what would happen if a nobleman wandered around at night with a bag of gold coins. It would be good for Basil, instead of living within the walls of the Marquis. Even after suffering and learning about the world, he will be able to become a fine nobleman. In fact, Basil had no intention of forcing anything on Julia. But he still doesn't understand why she told him this. While he was running, he tripped and fell, dropping the bag from his hands. Until this moment, Basil had not thought about what was in the bag. Of course, the men who were in the alley noticed him. Basil immediately realized his mistake, that he shouldn't have opened the bag in the alley. 3 men approached him closer with a knife in their hands. Basil asked to be allowed to leave, asking them if they knew who he was. But they don't care, they come even closer, although Basil asks them not to touch him. They began to frantically grab at the gold coins on the ground. Basil decides that he needs to run before they remember him. But there was a 3rd man behind him who did not allow him to leave. They pushed him against the wall and started pestering him to take everything he had. Basil began to shout that he would tell his father everything and he would execute them. But they only said that in that case they could not let him go safe. One of the men reminds us that carnivorous fish live on the southern coast. He said he would send Basil there and nothing would remain of him but bones. Levis never thought that it would be so difficult for him to study at such an age. He suggests taking a break, but Coco asks him to stop looking at his watch. Julia said that she could live for the rest of her life on the gifts she received from Shatrin. Coco thought that Levis's brain had melted because of studying. Julia suggests finishing for today, intending to say something else. The Liberation Army is distributing leaflets in the port, causing chaos inside the palace. Levis thought for a moment and asked how this concerned him. He said that, of course, he knew what the Liberation Army was. He remembers that there was a demonstration not long ago. The fleet commander will change. A new admiral from Baikan will arrive. This may reach the Baikan Emperor, who will learn that there are independence protesters in Ortega. If the Emperor finds out, he will attack Ortega again. Ortega was the only country that retained its borders. The Emperor was satisfied with the condition of keeping the Imperial fleet in the seas of Ortega. But who knows what will happen if such a peace is shaken by the power of the Liberation Army. Julia says that Father Levis will soon learn about the protests. The girl asks what he can do if he finds out about this. Levis knows that he will order everyone to be killed because that is the easiest way. In previous lives, the Liberation Army was always brutally executed. Levis must attend the meeting of the nobles to find out their opinion. The plan is good, but it needs to remain unnoticed. Levis is indignant because he is a prince, and what kind of talk is there about independence? But Julia, smiling, says that she has an idea. Eventually, Levis appears at the meeting disguised as a woman. All the guests' attention was directed to Levis. He developed paranoia that people had already recognized him. Julia tries to reassure him that no one recognized him. She tells him he was wonderful and asks him to be confident in himself. Attracting attention is an important part of being a royal. While he lives as Levis, he sometimes appears as a shadow of a personality and listens to revelations. All this will be very useful for them, as Julia says. But Levis isn't sure strangers will open up so easily. Anonymity makes a person more private, and it is better for him to hide his voice. Julia also asked Levis not to try to be feminine. After all, it is only a created image. Levis wondered what he could learn from the behavior of the women he knew. Coco is a charming and confident girl, and Julia is an unshakable and calm wave for him. Levis believes in himself that he can handle it by giving it his all. Julia and Coco are his close ones, his teachers, and he knows them well. Since Levis tolerates alcohol well, there is no need to worry. If someone tries to embarrass him, you need to keep your distance. One should avoid vulgar gossip and focus on elevated dialogues. Julia said that the lady would not speak directly because she had a sore throat. The man apologizes, explaining that he just wanted to ask her name. Julia recalls the border between winter and spring, named after the cold fairy. So she came up with a name for Levis. Now his name is Titania. After the meeting is over, Coco asks how it went. Julia asks Levis to make as many friends as possible. Levis remembers everyone present staring at him. He doesn't understand how one can love a person with whom he has never communicated. Julia agreed with him, saying that she didn't believe in love. These emotions are like bubbles for her that disappear at any moment. Levis remembered how he persuaded his mother to leave the palace. She cried and told him that he could blame her because she was staying. After all, even if another queen had become queen, His Majesty would have told her that he loved her more than anyone else. That's why Levis says there are people who believe that love lasts forever. Julia replied that she thought the same thing, and Lewis said that she sounded like she had lived several lifetimes. That's why she likes him and Coco, because they are pessimistic. Levis thought that if his head turned into a flower bed, he would simply be doused with water. He asked if Julia would be disappointed in him if he said he wanted to run away. He doesn't want to fight, he doesn't want to kill, he doesn't want to be the person he hates to be. But for Julia, a real coward is someone who makes no choice. Any choice requires courage, and running away is just one option. Levis must fight because His Highness has nowhere left to run. So the prince thought that in the end he would die anyway. He will either die at the hands of his father, or at the hands of his brothers, or perhaps because of Majoram. Maybe he will die an unnatural death and no one will know about it. In her 8th life, Julia told Coco that Levis had died. Coco then remembered her father, who was terribly irritating but kind. Even about the day when she came across a crying baby lying alone in a cradle. For Coco, Levis became a precious part of the family from the first time they met. When he died, Coco cried for a long time, looking as if she had truly lost a family member. Even if Julia is given another life, she will do the same and speak. Julia declares that they will be together, even if fate decides otherwise. She will not allow them to die unknown anywhere. The main character is confident that she and Coco will definitely be close. Levis can't believe it. They both are going to die with him. Julia knows that Coco thinks the same way because Louis is dear to her. Levis admits that he felt free when no one recognized him. Coco reminded him that he wasn't here for fun. He needs to keep an eye on the movements of the aristocrats and the Liberation Army. The Royal Manual says that the king must be able to think from the people's point of view. But Levis needs at least one companion. Julia thought Maxwell was perfect for the role. Julia promised to introduce them tomorrow. After she leaves, Levis asks Coco what she thinks of Julia. He still can't let go of the situation when he couldn't protect Julia from the hyenas. But Julia didn't run away and instead declared that she would be there. Coco thought that Levis had fallen in love with Julia and said that it was not her. She shouts that it would be better for him to date a man. Coco just doesn't want His Highness to suffer. She tells the prince that Julia is simply beyond his capabilities. Before leaving, Julia talked to a strange maid. She introduced herself as Trudy, saying that she had been hired by the palace department. In the end, Julia said that she would return later in the evening. Already at the market, the main character noticed that someone was following her. She didn't understand how the hyenas knew that she had left the palace. Of all the possible traitors, she singled out Trudy. But it's even better this way, because now she knows that there is a rat in the palace. The girl understands that she has no choice, and let it cost her her life. She is sure that he will first finish her off and then commit suicide. Julia can't do anything anymore because he's too close. The man suddenly grabs her by the shoulder and screams for her to die. Julia can't believe that her life will end like this. She can only hope that the pain will end quickly. But suddenly something happened, and the main character fell to the ground. She looked up and saw Lord Carus standing before her. The man got scared and ran away without doing anything. Karsu asked if he should finish him off, but Julia asked him to stop. Carus helps her up, saying that the man might return. Now that Carus was with her, she wasn't sure that the man would want to come back. Carus asked her how she dared to smile when she almost died. He asks if she is in such a hurry to go to the next world. Knowing that everything will start over again, Carus asks if it is worth it. Turning away, he quietly said that he felt angry when he saw Julia. Her smile always reminded him of a crack in glass. It seems to him that she is about to break, and his heart feels like it is being squeezed in a vice. That's why Carus asks if she really wants to live her whole life like this. She replied that getting rid of these hyenas was not that difficult. In the end, Carus orders her to follow him. They will go to Maxwell. Maxwell is touched that these two came to him together. Carus explained that they simply crossed paths and Julia was attacked by a hyena. Maxwell offered to provide an escort, but the girl refused. Carus orders him to find every hyena in Ortega and kill them. After all, only then will Julia definitely not die. She is the savior of Carus, thanks to whom he received a lot of information. It wasn't excessive concern or pity. Carus asked her not to argue with that. And now Julia says that she needs someone to accompany the noble person. Someone strong, reserved, and at the same time flexible. Realizing that they were talking about him, Maxwell said that he didn't have time for this. Julia said that this person is the second Prince of Levis in a woman's outfit. Julia warned the messenger that she would be gone all night. In payment for his debt, Carus invites her to stay in Ortega for a while. But the heroine tells him that he doesn't owe her anything, and on the contrary, he helps her. She can handle it herself, but Karis, of course, doesn't believe her. It's time for Julia to go, and Karis is a little disappointed that she's leaving so suddenly. When he was left alone, he began to think that Julia had always been like this. She was the one who never valued her life. At that moment, His Majesty's bird flies to him. She brings some kind of note with her, and Karis reads it. He runs into Maxwell's room, waking him up and telling him about the letter. Letter in the name of Keseno Evert Bacon, Emperor of Bacon. He appoints the second knight of the Empire as the new admiral of the Southern Fleet. Maxwell can't believe his ears, and Karis asks him to watch his words. He tells Kors that they are all loyal to him, not the Emperor. Maxwell says that this was the Emperor's way of repaying Karis's loyalty. Karis asks to tell him everything that Maxwell learned about Julia. Maid Julia Arte grew up in an orphanage in the eastern port of Ortega. She ended up in the orphanage at about 9 years old, and it is unknown where she was before that. The girl was smart beyond her years, so she was quickly sent out to work. As a result, she was taken into custody several times because she stole. Afterwards, she attracted the attention of the Meyramovs and got into the academy. Julia was especially close to Christine, and Basil was the one who often gave her gifts. Because of this, they called her a parasite and began to mock her. Karis can't believe that Julia lived such a terrible life. A commoner must feel very lonely in such a society. Julia had allegedly never left Ortega before. But then Karis doesn't understand how Julia knows so much about him. Even those closest to the Emperor cannot understand what is on his mind. But Julia knew in advance what decision the Emperor would make. What she said about her 9 lives is true. Karis asked Maxwell to find out more about Julia. Before leaving, he asked which room Julia was staying in. Julia suddenly woke up in the middle of the night because of a nightmare. She dreamed of her 4th or 5th life, which she had not dreamed of for a long time. She noticed Karus, who asked her what she had dreamed about, that she was crying. She asked him why he was there, and he replied that he thought she was having nightmares. Julia replied that she did not suffer from nightmares and that reality was worse. She thought that Karus couldn't stand crying women, so she asked him to ignore it. But Karis asked her how he could ignore what was happening. Julia realized that he was actually worried about her. She had learned over 9 lifetimes that trying to kill others meant putting your own life on the line. In her quest for revenge, Julia risks everything, including her life. Karis shares that he is now an admiral of the Southern Fleet. Now he simply cannot help but believe Julia's words about 9 lives. At first he didn't believe it, but Julia had never been wrong in her predictions. And suddenly the man asks if Julia ever thought about giving up. He asked if she would like to live freely and forget about the Meyramas. Karis will deal with the hyenas and do anything for Julia. However, if she does not give up the idea of revenge, then let her take Karis by the hand. They must become the most loyal friends as long as their revenge and mission have the same goal. In exchange for protection, Julia simply cannot up and die. Karis says it's because her life is as valuable as his. She wanted to hear these words so much that he needed them. And that is why the main character will do everything for him, just as he will do everything for her. The next day, Julia was getting ready to go to the palace square. Karis appears behind her, announcing that he will also go. They both felt awkward when they decided to speak together. Julia understood what it was like when they understood each other without words. Karis realized that she was the one he absolutely needed. This might be the first time in her 9 lives that she took his hand. It seems like they met each other properly for the first time. When the carriage arrived, Karis helped Julia down. As they walked, Julia told him that he could let go of her hand. But at that very moment, a man running past pushes her, and she falls right into Karis's arms. He asked her to walk alongside him because they didn't know when the hyenas would attack next. Julia thought that Karis was being overly protective. They arrived at the right place, and Julia thanked him for taking her there. Karis tells her that they will see each other more often now. For a moment, it even seemed to her that he didn't want to let go of her hand. Levis saw it all, unable to believe that Julia was holding a man's hand. He tells the assistants that they are leaving, although he originally wanted to meet Julia. When they asked why, he replied that he no longer saw the need for it. When Coco woke up, the maids told her that a request had come from her father. They reminded her that today was her birthday. Coco doesn't understand why she should rush to him at such an age. They also informed her that Julia had returned without levies today. And after that, the maids handed her a cake from Julia. Coco wondered how Julia knew when her birthday was. The maids were tired of looking at what was inside the box. When Coco opened it, there was a hair clip with forget-me-nots inside. The maids assumed that Louis had told Julia about her birthday. But Coco knows that he forgets her birthday every year. In any case, the maids really liked the hairpin. Coco asked them not to poke their noses into other people's business and to get down to business. Coco noticed that the hair clip contained a pearl, which she loved very much. She wondered how Julia could know her preferences. At first, Coco considered Julia an uncouth commoner, but after a while she saw a strong woman in her. But every time she sees her, Coco has a strange feeling. An ordinary commoner would have found it strange that Coco stood up for him. But Julia didn't even pay any attention to it, as if they had known each other for a long time. Coco finds Julia and asks her to stop lying to her. Julia didn't know it was her birthday, and Coco asked where the present came from. Julia bought the hair clip because she thought it would look nice on her. But Coco still doesn't believe her and asks her to tell the truth. She thought Julia wanted something from her. Then the main character asked her assistant to leave for a while. Coco wondered what it was since they were alone. And suddenly Julia tells her that a spy has appeared in the prince's palace. She says that we are talking about the new maid Trudy. She also tells how she was attacked by a hyena yesterday. Of all the people who knew about her departure to the city, only Trudy knew. This whole situation makes Coco incredibly angry. If they realize that their spy has been exposed, they will send someone more stealthy. So Julia asks Coco to appoint Trudy as her maid. After some time, Coco told Trudy about all the rules and nuances. Trudy is smart and quick-witted and also has a good reputation. Coco would never have thought she was a spy. Soon they come to Julia's room and she greets them. Trudy is pleased that she will finally get to Julia. But she is genuinely surprised when she sees that there is only one chair in the room. She sat up and asked warily what she had done wrong. Julia tells her that she sent the hyena to be killed. Trudy pretends not to understand what she's talking about. She began to justify herself by saying that she didn't know anyone here. The hyena that was sent yesterday is probably already dead since he failed the mission. And Trudy is expecting the same thing, but she is smart, and it was not for nothing that she was sent here. Julia asks her to think carefully about who she should stick with in order to survive. Trudy gave in and said she had no choice because her family was being threatened. An official from the royal department sent her to the second prince's palace, but the hyenas ordered her to keep an eye on Mrs. Julia. Julia explains to Coco that there is no point in being angry now. The main character shows Trudy the money and says that she will give it all to her. She asked Trudy to become her servant and occasionally pass them information about her. And then Julia will keep what Trudy caught a secret. Trudy agrees without hesitation, wanting to try. She asked if she would receive forgiveness, to which Julia replied that it was a deal. Trudy is required to report to an official once a month. The hyenas asked to find out when Julia leaves the palace and who she meets. Julia realized that the hyenas would soon contact Trudy and ask about her. She asked Trudy to tell them that Julia was going to bring in mercenaries. Trudy says the hyenas will try to attack, but Julia says that's what they're counting on. This time, the girl gives Trudy twice the amount of payment. Trudy is driven only by greed, and those words about family were probably a lie. Soon, security was hired for Julia, as she requested. The certificates inspire confidence, even though they are fake. Maxwell had been eavesdropping on their conversation the entire time. He can't believe that Julia knowingly hired hyenas as security. She asked him to follow them to find out where their hiding place was. Maxwell promised to take care of it and destroy them all. So a few days later, Julia goes to the city and takes security with her. They whisper that they will begin to act as soon as they turn into a quiet street. As they were riding in the carriage, Maxwell caught up with them and asked them to stop. The men were outraged and asked him to get lost. They were taken aback on the spot when Maxwell called them hyenas. Suddenly, Karis jumps onto the roof of the carriage. He pushes one of the hyenas off the carriage and takes his place. Babaslav grabs the man and begins to interrogate him. The second hyena realizes that this is all a trap they have found themselves in. But it's too late to think because Maxwell attacks him with a sledgehammer. Julia didn't expect Mr. Karras to come here. The man took her hand, saying that he could not leave her alone. When the hyenas are tied up, Karu asks to tell where their hideout is. But they said they refused and would take this information to their graves. Maxwell enters the conversation and tells them where their hideout is. He also reports that the customer is Marquis Majoram. Karras decides to introduce himself to them, giving his name. Such a small kingdom will fall before spring comes. He sees that they already regret everything, saying that they shouldn't have touched Julia. One of the hyenas loses his temper, asking how a commoner could be connected to the hero of Baikan. And then Julia answered honestly that Karras was the one she served with her heart. That day, the hyena's hideout was completely destroyed. Dozens of experienced hyenas were taken down by just 3 people. Julia remained in the carriage for her own safety. She was bored and needed to take at least a book with her. She suddenly noticed the hyena running away, wondering if she should tell Karus. Taking a closer look, the main character realized that she had seen this face before. In one of her past lives, she collaborated with the independence movement. She's sure it was that guy from the management. This could mean that they are funded by hyenas. But the majors are part of the pro-imperial faction. Julia wondered if he knew where his money was going. When it was all over, Karras told her she could go out. She's not sure whether to tell him about the independence movement. But I decided it wasn't worth it, since I only learned about it in this life. She told them about the approaching typhoon so that they would take the ships to the shore. Babaslav asked Maxwell to listen to Julia and do as she said. Karras told her that they would meet at Ortega's palace next time. Julia knows for sure that His Majesty does not want to be Ortega's ally. Karras told her that she could use him and he would do whatever was needed. Julia wondered why she hadn't been able to reach out to him in her past lives. But I decided that Karras was probably just very far away then. But now he is very close, you just have to reach out your hand. Julia seemed to desperately ask him if he would trust her. The man smiled and said that he was trying to do so. The main character doesn't know how to completely win his trust. Later, Coco tells Levis that Julia has gone to the square. He noted that the girl had been very busy lately. Coco suddenly tells him to let his love be healthy. Coco noticed that lately all he did was look for Julia. She asked Levis to remember the king and his mother. Levis knows why they couldn't let go of each other. Levis's mother had been a friend of Coco's mother since childhood. In her young eyes, she was dazzlingly beautiful. But for some reason, her smile always seemed empty and sad. Noticing her curiosity, her mother told her as if it were a secret. If the Marquis had not brought the current queen, it would be Levis's mother who would be standing next to the king. After her mother's death, Coco, of course, became a maid in the Levisa palace. Levis had a smile as sad as his mother's. He says that if the king had let his mother go, perhaps she would have been happy. In the end, everyone became unhappy. His Majesty, Levis's mother, and even the queen. There are people in the world whose hearts are empty, who make others suffer. Coco tells Levis that he and Julia are like that. She thought that the pain of her lover's betrayal was enough. And Coco fears that Julia might one day disappear like bubbles in water. When Julia returned, Trudy noticed blood on her dress. She reassured the maid that it was not her blood. She also said that no one would suspect Trudy, so everything was fine. Trudy was tasked with preparing Julia's bathroom. Julia thought that Baikon's envoys would hardly be welcome guests. They will deliberately behave in a despotic manner in order to increase the fear of war. It is necessary to choose a path that will benefit both Julia and Karus. So far, everything is going smoothly, probably because they are on the same side. In her past life, Coco was angry at Julia for her connection with Karus. The moment when she dared to take Karus's hand may have happened thanks to Coco. When Julia came out of the bathroom, she was met by Coco. She wanted to ask her something, so she stood and waited. She felt awkward when she said she wanted to know when Julia's birthday was. Julia pretends not to hear, so Coco repeats herself. But Julia, who grew up in an orphanage, never celebrated it. That's why the main character asked Coco not to bother with it. But Coco asked her to choose her birthday herself. She simply asked Julia to choose a date she liked. A memory came to mind of how in a past life, Coco asked to celebrate her birthday on the same day. This way she wouldn't forget her birthday even in her next life. So now Julia tells Coco that she hasn't changed a bit. She almost forgot that the Coco in front of her was not the Coco from the past. Actually, Coco wants to give her something too. But Julia said she could do it for no reason. Coco says she liked her gift and it is her favorite flower. Julia didn't really know this, so she was surprised. Now it's clear why Coco kept saying she wanted to get the pearls. And Julia also understood why Coco always says she wants to receive a gift. She talked about her favorite things, so that in her next life she would like Julia a little more. Julia couldn't sleep at night because of the constant thoughts in her head. She divided everyone into groups, into those who needed revenge. But this life is different. Feelings that were long forgotten are returning. Julia must find someone who will help her with revenge. In this life, the main character will definitely save Alex Kwan. The aristocrats asked Julia how she became friends with Coco. As the day of the third round approached, Princess Shatrin saw Levis every day. She and the second prince discussed the next plan. Julia also became close to the maids of the princess's palace. The aristocrats tell how all the maids ran away from the palace after a week. They were embarrassed and confused when Julia asked if they wanted to be friends with Coco. She told them that they could ask if they were interested in anything. While they were bombarding her with questions, Levis appeared. He took Julia, and she said goodbye to the aristocrats. Levis is surprised that all of Shatrin's maids remained charmed. Only in front of Coco the maids were like sheep. Levis says Shatrin learned the topic of the third round from her father. It is a duel of honor, a royal battle, or a sparring match between nobles who have risked their honor. Shatrin could send anyone because everyone was talented. Levis thinks it's better to give up on victory in advance, waiting for the next opportunity. Julia knows the right man. He can be called Ortega's best swordsman. To participate, you must be either an Ortega nobleman or a knight. Julia replied that he was from Ortega and that he was from a noble family. The anti-imperial nobility joined the Liberation Army and allied themselves with the pirates. The king asked Baiken for help. The city was burning. People were screaming. The Marquis sold the ship into slavery, where Julia met Alexa. When Julia told her about her lives, she asked if she believed her. Alaska thought she told her this so she would believe it. Even though they had barely met, Julia talked about it because she was going to die anyway. If she dies and comes back, Alexa will forget her. Then she said that there was a spare boat on the Karma. Usually there is careful supervision here, but in a storm like this there may be problems with patrols. If the escape fails, they will definitely be killed, and Julia is afraid of this. But since they're going to die anyway, Alexa says it's better to leave without regrets. When they got into the boat, Alexa asked Julia if she knew how to row. Julia's muscles were all numb, and she had no more strength left. The pirates noticed them running away and began an attack. Alexa decided to return to the ship and deal with them, telling Julia to run. She told her that she wouldn't be able to fight with such a weak body anyway, but at least she would save her. Alexa asked to save her in the next life if they met. After that, Julia was never able to find Alexa. The only clue we have is her name. Levis also said that this was the first time he had heard Alexa's last name. Julia was not surprised by this because this family had disappeared 10 years ago. Viscount Kwan was the victim of an investment scam and found himself in large debt. He was unable to pay off the debt, so he gave up his daughter as collateral. But in the end, the Viscount simply committed suicide. And in the end, her daughter was sold to mercenaries who were in debt. Alexa was a genius who had been practicing fencing since childhood. Her skills were so outstanding that no one considered her a noble lady. Coco decided to ask Julia how she knew this, and the main character replied that Alexa saved her life. Levis realized that Julia didn't really want to go into details. Julia thinks that Alexa is still with the mercenaries because she can't leave them without paying off the debt. Levis asked if she was really suggesting that the royal family save her so that she could defend her honor. Coco asked him if he really thought it was that simple. This is possible because usury is prohibited by Ortega's national law. It is strange that at the mention of the royal family, the large debt that had made her a slave disappeared. But Levis agrees to Julia's request, saying that he will do everything in his power. The next action takes us to the Ortega Merchants Association. Coco asks to see all the documents about Alex, saying that he is the second prince. The worker said that he understood everything and asked to wait. He's not afraid of the second prince, but Coco gave him goosebumps. According to the papers, the principal amount of the debt has already been repaid. Levis told the man that he was good at uncovering wrongdoings in front of the royal family. He will inform his father about how the Kwan family fell victim to loan sharks. The worker asks to spare him, promising to do everything they say. Coco asks to give all the documents confirming that the Kwan family's debt has been repaid. In fact, Levis does not want to turn a blind eye to such people. It is impossible for him to deal with corruption at the moment. The documents indicate Kwan Alexa's place of residence. Julia asked to be dropped off in front of the square and to wait in the palace. It is not necessary to go with her because she will not be alone. Karis didn't think they would meet again so soon. Julia tells him that she wants to go somewhere with him. Karis can't refuse her, even if he's busy. Last time Julia didn't tell Karis about the hyenas. In fact, she was afraid because she couldn't open up to him completely. But if she wants him to trust her, then she needs to do it. Karis asked if the man she was looking for had anything to do with revenge. Julia said no, but she was the first one to say that she should survive. Karis didn't even think she could say such a thing. He wished Julia had shown this side of herself earlier. The main character smiled and said that she would try. The house they arrived at looks abandoned. The Viscount sold everything before his death to pay off his debt and lived in this house. But now Alexa was all alone here, and that made her sad. When they went inside, things looked even worse. In her past life, Julia often heard rumors about Alex. At the time, Julia thought Alexa was quite rich. But I never even imagined that Alexa lived in such a place. At that very moment, they heard a voice asking who they were. When Julia turned around, she saw that it was Alexa. Alexa was surprised that they knew her name, thinking that they were her clients. She said she was no longer involved in killing. Alexa asks her not to come closer because her dress will get dirty, but Julia doesn't care. The girl extended her hand to her, saying that she had come to save her. She says her family's debt is completely cleared and she won't have to fight anymore. Julia introduces herself to Alexa, saying that she is Prince Levis's maid. As proof, she hands Alex the documents. When Alexa realized it was true, she asked what they wanted. The debt was paid off a long time ago, but Alexa is still here because of the high interest. But now it's all over, and Alexa is finally free. Alexa always hoped to put an end to her unhappy life. And Alexa never thought she would live to experience true freedom. She was so touched by this that she cried with happiness. Alexa decides to ask why they are helping her. Julia would like to answer that Alexa saved her in her past life. She had nothing to say in response, and Karis approached her to calm her down. He himself answered that they had nothing to say for now, so Alexa would understand later. He asked her to come with them so that he could escort her to the palace. When they arrived, Julia asked Coco to say hello to Alexa. Alexa asked them what she should do here now. Since she is free, she is no longer obliged to follow orders. But then Alexa asked what her life was for if everything was like this. She always had a sword in her hands, and now, having received freedom, she doesn't know what to do. Somehow Julia didn't even expect such a turn of events. Alexa, who saved her then, was 6 years older than her. She's just a girl who just grew up. Coco stood around the corner and listened to their conversation, feeling sad. The maid asked her what she was doing there. Coco took her basket and walked over to Alexa, asking her to start with food. She asks her to eat her fill, wash herself and rest. Coco tells Alexa that her life is in her own hands now. It's time to introduce Cardelia to Alexa, which Julia does. Coco will be doing a lot for Alexa now, so she shouldn't reject her efforts. Julia also mentions that she wanted to offer her something. She asks her to become a royal warrior and take part in the competition. Alexa had no problem answering that she could beat everyone. Coco was surprised that this girl was so confident. When the prince returns, they will have a welcoming party. Julia will be away for a short while because she has an appointment. Coco asked if she could cancel the meeting, but Julia can't do this because it's very important. As night fell, the main character came to the sea. Meeting them again, she cannot help but express her gratitude. She wondered what they would say to her if she told them about her past lives. They'll think she's lying and laugh, or they'll think she's crazy. However, Julia knows that this will not happen because she already told them. Coco believed her and told her what to do in the next life. Alexa didn't believe it, but she saved her anyway. That's why Julia can't tell them about it now. She decided to continue to hide the curse, enduring it alone. Julia will try to survive this without support. She understands that she will have to become colder and tougher. Alexa was wearing such a beautiful dress for the first time. Levis asked why she looked beautiful even in a dress. He says that he will lose the hearts of the maids who love him. Coco tells him that she will look at him when he is born in the next life. Alexa thanks Julia when she tells her she is beautiful. Nobles should not be too polite to commoners. After this, Julia asked Alexa to try on the armor. She took the simple armor and swords that knights use. Time passed and they became ready to meet Shatrin. She was informed that Levis had brought a knight to participate in the duel. Alexa will participate in the Duel of Honor as a Shatrin warrior. She sighed heavily because they had already decided that it would be someone else. She's not sure that Alexa, whom he brought, is better than her candidate. Alexa doesn't remember at what age she started fencing. Then Starin asked if she had ever lost a fight. In fact, she really likes Alexa's confident look. In the end, Shatrin decided to trust Levis and Alexa. She tells Alexa that if she wins, she will fulfill any request she makes. She promised that she would do everything that Princess Ortega could do. Alexa thanked her for this, and motivation appeared. Coco asked Julia if she had heard about Shatrin's promise. Julia thought that Shatrin wanted to inherit the title, because this way she will be able to regain her parents' authority. The decision will be made by the first prince and princess. The knight introduces himself to Alex as Gustav, the first prince's guard. He told Alexa to distinguish between courage and recklessness. The girl did not answer, only thanking him for the advice. Shatrin asked Levis if Alexa would definitely win. She winced when he replied that he didn't know. He will also see Alexa's skills for the first time today. Shatrin was indignant, thinking that Levis wanted to disgrace her. The third round soon began. The knights drew their swords and began to fight. Gustav notices an unprecedented sword technique. He thinks that this is how mercenaries fight, but he sees traces of fencing. Everyone noticed that Gustav suddenly lost consciousness. The observer decides to ask Shatrin who Alexa is. Shatrin confidently replied that this was a great warrior chosen by her. Gustav thought that the duel was a game in which one had to please the royal family. He can't allow himself to be defeated in front of everyone. Everyone noticed that he was attacking above the waist, which was dangerous. But Alexa didn't lose her composure and blocked his blow with her sword. She whispered to him to distinguish between courage and recklessness. Before anyone could even notice, it was all over. Suddenly the knight Gustav threw down his sword and fell to his knees. The game was over. The winner is Princess Shatrin's knight, Alexa. Later, Levis told Shatrin that he was right, that he could be trusted. And Shatrin said that this was all thanks to the knight he brought. She asked Alexa if she remembered that she had promised to fulfill her promise. Shatrin even wanted to do something special for her. She suggests allocating a sum for maintenance and finding a spacious premises. Shatrin wants to make the nameless nobleman a knight of the royal guard. Julia thought that Alexa would be happy with such an offer. But Alexa said she didn't want to restore the family's honor. She wants to become Prince Levis's personal maid and live in his palace. Later, Alexa asked if there was a reason why she couldn't stay there. Julia explained that a nobleman could not protect a commoner. Alexa knows this, so she chose something else, knowing something could cause trouble. If Alexa's parents were alive, she's sure they would be happy for her. The royal palace is a place with many restrictions. Alexa replied that she would leave the palace when Julia left. Julia remembered that Alexa had smiled the same way that day. She became a different person, but only Alexa remained the same. She told Alexa to tell her if she wanted to leave the palace. Julia wondered if relationships could be rooted in the soul rather than the body. She is also curious about what will happen to those she did not save. Maxwell reveals that they never found Basil Marjoram. Rumors of his escape spread, and the Marquis' troops were mobilized to search for him. The vagabonds took Basil's money and sent him to a pirate ship. Maxwell is curious about what Basil's delicate hands can do. He thought Julia was in a bad mood, but she said everything was fine. She is putting together a flower basket to send to Carus to celebrate his appointment as the new admiral. Maxwell said the creation looked quite ugly. These thorny roses remind him of the beginning of the war. But Julia said that was too much because they were alive too. If you send this to Carus, he won't be very happy. In the end, Julia decided to send this basket to the Marjorams. So soon Christine was informed that flowers had been delivered to her. She asked in surprise who had delivered them. The maid said admiringly that it was the first prince who did it. After the last competition, the first prince became especially picky. The maid thinks that the prince sent flowers as a sign of reconciliation, but Christine isn't sure that flowers can be seen as a political relationship. She thought that the first prince might even feel something for her. But when she unpacked the box, she saw that very same bouquet of Julia's. The maid thought that the bouquet was from the first prince, since it was sent from the palace. But Christine quickly realized that Julia had sent the basket. After Julia arrived at the palace, Christine wrote letters asking for an audience many times. Previously, Julia couldn't even look at the shadow of the royal family. Julia stole the medal, became Levis's maid, and Basil disappeared somewhere. Christine suddenly thought that Julia might be involved in this. But Vasily was in the underground dungeon, and Julia was in the palace. Christine decided that she would need her mother's help. After some time, Marquise Marjoram arrived at the palace. Unfortunately, they won't be able to ignore the Queen. The Marquise said she wanted to see her daughter. At one time, Julia was glad that the Marquise called her that. But the noble Marquise could not consider the commoner as her child. The Marchioness said that Julia's work at the palace does not change their relationship. The woman said that Christine missed her very much. She asks why Julia began to hate them and came to the palace. Julia had to defend herself and go where the Marquis could not reach. She says he's trying to force her into marriage. The Marquise thinks that she is simply confusing sympathy and love. She asks Julia to come home, and she regrets a lot. She thought about sending her to Baikan to study or giving her to another family. But Julia remembers that they didn't want to let her go so easily. The girl made it clear that she had no intention of returning. Christine begged to bring Julia back, but it was not meant to be. In any case, Julia knows the Marquis better than her daughter. She asks Julia to promise that nothing will happen to her family. Julia promised that she wouldn't do anything to them. If things had turned out differently, the Marquise could have taught her. Julia realizes that she was just a tool for them. The Marquise is very experienced and therefore understood everything immediately. But if they try to kill her, they'll have to work even harder. Summer is coming, but a cool dessert can help you survive this weather. Trudy brought Julia some ice cream that the Chatrin maids had ordered. The princess's palace now seems suspiciously crowded. The servants bought not only ice cream, but also bread, perfume, and dresses. But the princess's chefs are able to make ice cream themselves. Chatrin wants to boast that she won the competition, so she throws a banquet. And, of course, she needs to introduce Alexa to the people, because she is a Knight of Her Highness and the winner of the Jewel of Honor. Levis bursts in and tells them that Chatrin is throwing a banquet. She seemed very happy about the win and said to be sure to bring Alexa. Levis asks how they know all this. They said that the maidbirds brought them news. Levis asked Alexa if she knew too. She replied that he needed to listen carefully if he didn't know something. Levis said that to become his maid, you had to have talent. Until recently his only servant was Coco, he refused others. But Julia showed up and everyone decided that a medal should be a requirement. With the advent of Alexa, everyone started talking about the need to take the knighthood exams. But it's not just about bragging about victory. Come to think of it, Chatrin invited her father too. But for a king to attend a banquet, the event must be of enormous scale. Shatrin recently broke off her engagement to Basil. Maybe she's about to announce a new alliance. Then, the banquet will become a key event in finding a husband. But Levis is not sure that the first prince will sit idly by. Julia believes that he will host a banquet on the same day as the princess. The first prince is furious that Shatrin called her father. He thinks she's trying to humiliate him because she won the competition. He asks Christine to be quiet, asking if she knows what Majoram said when he brought her here. He thinks it's a lie that she's a child with incredible intelligence. Rumors have surfaced that Christine did not attend the academy on her own. A commoner cannot be better than a lady who was trained by Ortega's teachers. The prince asks Christine to use her head and come up with a better plan. There are too many loopholes in the banquet. Julia certainly didn't plan it. The opponent in this fight is not Levis, not Starin, but Julia. Christine calms down and asks His Majesty to hold a banquet. She says that it needs to be done on the same day and at the same time as Shatrin. A few days later, the date for the banquet was set. The king was very pleased when Shatrin broached the subject of marriage for the first time since the breakup of the engagement. Thus, his visit to the princess's banquet was a foregone conclusion. Everyone wanted to receive an invitation, especially nobles with sons of marriageable age. However, later the first prince announced the date of his banquet. Julia said this in advance because she knows Christine well. The first prince incites Shatrin by holding a reception on the same day. It becomes a stupid quarrel between brother and sister, not a battle for the crown. The king will not want to get involved in the children's squabbles, and in the end he will not come to anyone. Christine wants to devalue the man's despair and show his insignificance. The nobles will not come to Shatrin, because on the other side there is the first prince, the queen, and Marquis Majoram. Levis offers to cancel everything, but Shatrin will not want to accept defeat. Levis is not going to be a scapegoat, and no one can calm Shatrin's anger. Shatrin clearly has no chance of winning this battle. If only, when Julia wants it, Carus will appear at the right moment. Maxwell asks Julia what she plans to do. If the Emperor's envoy turns out to be an unpleasant character, Carus must become a guest. He should personally visit the king and tell him about the message. The issue is about preventing the expansion of the Marquis's power. Julia agreed and hoped that Maxwell could help. The banquet that the prince and princess will hold on the same day will take place in 10 days. Julia asks you to tell Carus that he must attend Shatrin's banquet. On the outskirts of Ortega, if you walk along the pier, there is a small shelter. There, in the corner of the office, you need to find notes and give them to someone. They represent all the efforts Julia put into the academy. At the banquet, Levis asks Alexa to be careful with Shatrin. It's all because today Shatrin is simply angry. The Count promised to come to the banquet, but ended up pulling the wool over her eyes. Levis asks her to calm down, but it seems impossible. She is sure that her brother would not use the method out of pride. Then Levis asked if she knew who had been visiting the first prince lately. Christine imagines herself to be part of the royal family, which irritates Shatrin. Julia knew that Christine had no friends, but she had a bad reputation among the maids. It would be a waste to use the princess as an ally. Despite everything, Shatrin is the daughter whom the king loves very much. The servant hands Shatrin something and she asks what it is. He said that this was an invitation to a banquet from the first prince. The nobles are confused that both heirs had a banquet. If the princess gives in, the event will become more significant. For these words, which the servant conveyed from the prince, Shatrin slapped him. Having made an enemy out of Shatrin, he will certainly regret it. Soon the king is informed that Carus demands an audience. The official letter has not been sent yet. The king urgently declared that he would meet with Carus immediately. While Carus was waiting for the king, he was offered some tea. The man was interested in where Julia was now and what she was doing. He knows nothing about the order of succession, but he is interested in Julia's decision. Soon, Carus met with the king, who was honored to see him. He said he heard that the emperor had appointed a new admiral. Carus clarifies that the previous commander took bribes. Kroll stated that he was ready to help and would cooperate with the south. Carus thinks that King Ortega is simply afraid of the emperor. The king decides to hold a welcoming banquet after the ceremony. He asks if Carus will go to the banquets because there are nobles his age there. Realizing that this is what Julia wanted, Carus agrees. The atmosphere is heating up and it is unknown what will happen next. Rumors will begin to circulate that Shatrin does not have the qualities to become queen. But even in this situation, Coco noticed how calm Julia was. She is sure that the girl is up to something again. Levis noticed that there was some noise at the entrance, thinking that someone had arrived. The guests began to rejoice when they saw that His Highness the King himself had arrived. Shatrin ran to her father, thinking that he would not come. He introduces her to Carus when she asks who he is. Coco wonders why the famous second night is in Ortega. The rumor spread and all the nobles began to come to this banquet. The first prince's palace must be empty, which is why he is angry. Shatrin thanks the admiral for attending her banquet. When she asked him if he wanted to dance with her, Carus had only one thing in mind. But in the end, the man agrees to dance with Shatrin. The nobles never thought they would see anything like this. They emanate greatness, and just one look is stunning. Levis feels uneasy because of a strange feeling somewhere inside. He noticed that Carus's gaze was definitely not directed at Shatrin. Suddenly, they announce that they are demanding that the imperial army be expelled and that the country be led on the path to independence. Carus immediately intervened in the conversation and asked what this meant. There is complete chaos in the palace. Something strange has begun. On such an important day, the Liberation Army unexpectedly began a demonstration. The most criticized was the Marquis, the leader of the pro-imperial faction. Alexa says the army will be on the side of the anti-imperialists. But for a very long time, the army was inactive. The Marquis did not know that unrest would begin. The army was like firewood to Majoram, and its appearance caused unrest among the people. Coco asked Levis if he felt relieved. She noticed that Levis was not himself today. She jokingly asked him if he had fallen in love with Admiral Carus. But Levis was only thinking about the fact that Carus and Julia couldn't date. Julia wonders what happened to the first prince. The first prince became angry and kicked Christine out of the palace. Coco eagerly awaits the Marquis' reaction to all of this. Julia thinks that Marjoram is going to persuade the first prince to marry Christine. Nothing strengthens bonds like marriage. Julia does not deny that Christine tried to become the head of the family. It seems the time has come to choose between becoming a queen for the sake of the family or fulfilling a dream. In the bathroom, Trudy asks if the water temperature is normal. She feels sorry for the first prince's servants, who throw everyone out of the palace when they are in a bad mood. They say that he doesn't let strangers into his chambers. Julia asked Trudy to bring a change of clothes while she finished her bath. She paid her for her work, and Trudy asked how she could help this time. In the palace, among the lower-ranking aristocrats, there is a man in charge of the first prince's garden. Trudy realized she needed to get closer to her, and Julia only realized how greedy she was. Returning to her room, Julia noticed that the light in Coco's room was still on. When she came inside and called her, Coco was a little scared. Julia thought she was doing something bad, but Coco wasn't doing it. It turns out that Coco burned all the letters sent by Christine. Coco says she decided not to show the letters to Julia. Julia didn't even know that Christine still wrote letters. Coco sadly asked if she was going to meet her, but Juliet said no. There was something like friendship between Julia and Christine. Julia begged Christine to help her, promising not to reveal her secret. Christine told her that they were friends despite their social statuses. Julia begged Christine to ask the hyenas not to chase her anymore. It was the third life of the main character when she wrote letters to Christine. Christine was behind the one who offered Julia the role of concubine. Father noticed that Christine seemed depressed lately. The king is going to mobilize the royal guard to suppress them. Christine believes that they need to form a task force and track down the Liberation Army's hideout. Her mother interrupted her and told her that she had to eat first. The father says that he initially wanted to entrust this matter to Basil. Things have been going wrong for a long time. There is no news from Basil. Suddenly, Cressitin is informed that they want to betroth her to the first prince. Tomorrow, father will go to the king. The decision is hasty, but already made. If Basil had not been born, Christine would have been their heir. Christine says that if her brother doesn't come back, someone has to take over the family. The mother noted that she spoke as if she wished Basil would not return. She trusts Christine because she has never disappointed her. The mother asks her to think everything over carefully and think with her head. Christine needs to decide what is the best choice for the family.